Formula One Philosophy, episode 18. Sean and Nick, separate but together again for another episode. We'll be together soon. We blame producer Gatsby for being apart. He just refused to do his job, refused to get things ready for us in our little man cave. You lazy, stupid dog. But anyways, we're going to talk about
you really shouldn't be so hard on him, Nick.
I'm the one who hired him. You're right. You warned me a million times.
It is entirely your doing.
Yeah. You know, he's pretty cool sometimes, you know, when he's not licking the couch or his balls or running around when he's supposed to be working.
I mean, if you could lick your own balls, wouldn't you do it?
Oh, not flexible enough. It's not from a lack of trying.
Well, that's what I mean. If you could, you probably would.
So what you're saying is I'm just jealous. I'm just jealous of producer Gatsby.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyways, when you hear this, producer Gatsby, get back to work. As always, F1_philosophy at Instagram. F1philosophypod@gmail.com to join our fantasy league for the 2024 F1 season. I don't think producer Gatsby or anybody did that well this weekend. Do you know offhand how you did, Sean?
I don't, but I'll pull up the league while we're talking and we'll fill you in after.
Yeah. I think I got one of my teams right, and then the other was just there may have been a Valtteri Bottas inclusion in one of my teams, so yeah.
Yeah, I had him as well.
Oof. Those Saubers are a letdown.
Yeah. I was just going to say, who would have thought he would be the underperforming one that week?
For someone who seems so confident in getting a race seat next year, he's really just fallen off a cliff. Like there's no business for him thinking he has any options right now. Anyway.
I don't know what's going on there, but yep.
Yeah. We'll talk about it in a sec. And F1 Philosophy at YouTube. Thanks, guys, for giving us traction on YouTube. We really appreciate every like, every comment, every share, every remix of our content. We're doing okay. And we want to get Formula One Philosophy out there. Like I said before, we want Formula One Philosophy in your car, while you're cooking dinner, at work, at home, while you're sleeping, while you're visiting your grandmother in the old age home. She starts saying things out of the back of her mouth, like backhanded comments about the Jamaican and Filipino maid, basically saying things ain't what they used to be. You look at your grandmother and you say, hey, why isn't Formula One Philosophy on in this nursing home? And she'll say, hey, I'm sorry. Now I'm going to go to the washroom. You can put on Formula One Philosophy and make sure the maids don't steal my stuff. How was your week, Sean?
My week was fine. It sounds like there might be something going on with you, though.
I had a bad experience in a nursing home.
I can imagine.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that was straight from the heart, everybody. I just been crazy busy. You know, it's good. It's going to be a busy summer. It's going to be a cruel summer, as Ace of Base once said. Those philosophers. But yeah. Want to get into it?
Let's do it.
All right. The Spanish Grand Prix. Not a letdown, I'd say, compared to Canada, but like following Canada, you were never, ever going to be anything comparable, I think. It was still a decent race. Before we talk about what we saw, what did you think, Sean?
I thought it was a decent race. I know there's probably some people out there who think it was boring, especially when you compare it to Canada, but I think it had its fair share of excitement.
Yeah, boring's not the word. There was still a lot going on. It's just like there's been this crescendo, I think, week to week, especially since Monaco was terrible. But like we saw, Miami was pretty good. Imola was pretty good. Monaco was a step back in terms of what we saw, but there was a lot to talk about. And then Canada was just spectacular, that I think we needed to take a step back before we have the summer flurry. You know, these next couple of races are going to be very, very good, very exciting. A lot to talk about, I imagine.
Yeah. Hopefully, Austria and what's the next one?
At Silverstone.
Silverstone are as good, if not better, than what we're seeing out of Spain. Again, nothing earth-shattering in Spain, but there were a lot of on-track overtakes. There were a lot of good moves made. The beginning of the race was phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. I think we're going to probably do most of the episode based on those first 4 laps. If you consider it, but like we're going to have to talk a bit about the strategy, but like we'll start with Russell's flying start. Lap 1, first corner. Like, who is that guy?
That start was so good. I actually thought it was Lewis Hamilton. That's the exact same move Lewis pulled on Fernando in Australia, his first season.
You're right. Way back when.
Yeah.
I was also going to say that he channeled Alonso 2013, was it? A little bit. Alonso took the inside, he took the outside. But Alonso did the same thing. I think it was 4th to 1st.
Mm.
Difference is Fernando took that and didn't give it back up. Georgia, I think within 4 or 5 laps, had already lost the lead to Verstappen.
Yeah, that was never going to stick.
Yeah. Once again, robbed of driver of the day, even though I think to me he was clearly the greatest driver, or not the greatest, but he was the best driver on the track. Again, like he squeezed everything out of that Red Bull. Even though you brought up an excellent point in the last episode saying how he's not completely comfortable with the car anymore because they're trying to give Perez something. But
that's a feeling I have, yeah.
I think you were right, though. And I think he was just able to squeeze every last drop out of that Red Bull again.
Mm-hmm. And mind you, it's a track that should be better for them. So there's that.
I don't even remember where Perez finished, though. Like you said, it should have been better, but like, what did he finish, 8th?
He gained 1 place, I believe, at the end of the day. So yeah, 8th.
So I want to talk more about Verstappen. Like he seems to like always be at the right place at the right time, put himself in the right position, did the overtakes at the beginning of the race that he needed to, where we'll talk about in a bit. Norris didn't. But at the same time,
yeah,
we have to ask, is Verstappen that good or is Perez that bad? I don't know anymore.
Yeah, and it really is a tricky question to put any sort of answer to, because I truly think that Verstappen is not human. He seems to be a generational talent that has skipped a few generations. Right? If you consider every generation to be incrementally better than the last, Verstappen skipped like 10 generations and he's here. Right? So that's how I see it. Like, there really shouldn't be a way that he is that much faster and that much better around so many consecutive tracks than Perez, who, by all metrics, is not a bad driver.
No.
But he qualified poorly, I think he qualified sixth.
No, he qualified ninth.
He probably no, because he had a grid drop, didn't he?
You're right.
Did he start outside the top 10?
Oh, that's right. No, so he qualified 8th and started 11th. So
Okay.
technically he finished where he qualified, but you're right. Where he started, he gained 3 spots. Yeah.
Right. So, and that seems to be his norm. Like he's not making up a whole ton of places every race, which when we look at the great drivers out there, that is what they do. Right? They may have an off day or two qualifying, but then they're making up tons of places throughout the race. We've seen it from Hamilton going from damn near the back to win the race. We've seen it from Max going from, mid-pack, if not further, up to the top again. So Perez routinely finishing midfield at best and staying in the midfield. He's basically finishing where he was when he was with Force India Racing Point. So it kind of makes you wonder that does the car actually have that much input into the driver's final position, right? Everybody's saying, oh, you put any driver in that Red Bull and they'll be competing with Max Verstappen. Well, clearly not.
Yeah.
Sergio is kind of floundering where he was in lesser hardware. Yes, he had some podiums and some good finishes in that lesser hardware, but he's also had good finishes in this Red Bull, right? So the point I guess I'm trying to make is Sergio as a driver might just be what we're seeing now. And maybe everybody's been wrong and that the car isn't really that impactful. Maybe more of it does go down to the driver than we give it credit for.
Or at least this Red Bull team, right? Like maybe this Red Bull team has been completely reliant on good drivers this whole time, or input drivers. Like so I'm trying to say maybe Vettel was that good. Maybe Verstappen was that good. Maybe the years when Ricardo was achieving what he was achieving, that was his prime. You could say. Maybe this Red Bull team doesn't have the engineering we thought it did.
Well, I think we're kind of saying the same thing. Mine is less specific to Red Bull, but...
Oh, so you're saying like the entire grid is reliant on good input drivers nowadays?
Well, what I'm trying to say in very simple terms is I think the generational drivers, the Max Verstappens, the Schumachers, the Sennas, the Laudas, whoever else, are going to be good kind of no matter where they are, with certain limitations. Put any of those drivers in a top 3 team, let's say, and they're going to be fighting for a championship. But if you were to take, let's see, who's on the grid here that you're probably going to get mad at me for saying. Take an Albon, put him in a Mercedes. Does he start competing with Max Verstappen? Right? Or if you take Max Verstappen and put him in that second Williams, is he stuck pinned to the bottom with Alex and Logan? Right? It's one of these things. I'm struggling to try and put it together properly here.
Maybe you're trying to say like the best drivers. It doesn't matter where they are, and then no. An average driver is going to flounder eventually, even at the best team.
I think what I'm trying to say is there are F1 cars, and then there are bad F1 cars. If that makes sense. Right? Everybody has put this Red Bull car on a pedestal as being a feat of engineering and a mastery of aerodynamics. and that McLaren missed the ball and they've fucked up so much, or not McLaren, sorry, Mercedes, over the last 2 years. And then there is an aspect of that. Obviously, they seem to have found the problem and fixed it. But if you take like this top 6 or top 7 from this last weekend, Red Bull, McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari, if you were to shuffle all those drivers, would the grid still look the way it is? Or would we see wherever Max Verstappen has come to the top?
That's a good point. And I think the clue is in Toto Wolff trying to get him to Mercedes. Like, that's the answer. That you're right. Maybe they do recognize his generational talent. And doesn't matter how much someone like Zach Brown says, oh, Max would not be winning. Like, every one of those drivers would be, like, the top 7 would be champions if they had that Red Bull. The Wolff is calling bullshit on that and saying, I want him in my car because we'll take that next step. And I think, and go on.
I don't think you're getting my point, but that's fine. It's not really relevant. Just a comment about Toto getting Max. I think Toto wants to get Max because he's butthurt he missed out on him as a junior driver, and he'll do anything to screw Horner.
Okay, I'll listen back to what you were trying to say to get your point across. I'm thinking you're saying that the car isn't as big of a deal as we think it is. Is that basically to sum it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. And
okay.
Yeah, and speaking of, like, if we want to talk about drivers who are up and coming and potentially could be generational, we've talked about this the last couple of weeks about Norris, that maybe he does have more input into that McLaren revival than we originally thought. And he seems close. He seems a lot closer to being, I don't think he'll ever be Verstappen, but he seems close to being a very formidable rival. He's almost there. But what do you...
If he can get out of his own head, yes.
Yeah, because I was going to say that. You called it so perfectly in the predictions. You said he's going to do a lap 1 fuck up. And even though he didn't DNF, he still did. He still made a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if it was him being too keen on watching Verstappen, or if he's just not used to being out in front. But he left the door wide open for George, who in theory had the better line into that corner. So I don't know why he wanted to push Max off that far to the side. It hurt his line into turn 1, and it gave George that beautiful entry that, had him leading that first couple laps. So, I don't know. Lando needs to figure out something. I was hoping that once he had got a win under his belt, it would go away, but clearly it's still there. Yeah, I would tend to say it's a bit of immaturity, but he's been there long enough that shouldn't be the case.
He came on the grid only 3 years after Verstappen. And
right, so
yeah, and this is what his now. Wait, sorry, was it 2018 or 2019? Off the top of your head, do you remember when Norris came in? It was.
I want to say 18.
So this would be year 7. So around year 7 was when Max was about to win. So it could be next year for Norris, who you and I have been calling that for a couple weeks now, saying just rattle the Red Bulls, focus on winning next year. That's maybe what this year's all about, just experimenting, learning things like this. But you're right, like why destroy your race to stop Max in the first corner? You had everything lined up for you with that pole. That's something, yeah, and we saw that in China too. We saw that
Yep.
in China with Lewis as well.
But this one with Norris just really bothers me because he's on pole. He's on the outside of the grid. He's got the line into turn one.
Yeah.
So Lando getting off the line not well, and Max being a little quicker up the inside. Lando cuts over and basically pushes him onto the grass a little bit, which, okay, fair play. It was enough room that Max didn't lose too much. But now Lando's got to go back outside to make the line, right? Because that line into one needs to be relatively, how do I say this? Because of the G and that S turn, so 1 into 2, that complex,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to make one fairly steep entry with, if you want any chance on it getting a good exit from 2. So as soon as he started cutting across towards Max, he ruined any chance he had of making one in first place.
By steep, you mean the slight elevation? You got to go in fast, slow down quickly, and then take that elevation into the inside. Is that what you're saying?
No, there's really not much elevation into turn 1. Turn 2 has a little bit of uphill elevation on it. What I mean by steep is you almost want to try and turn 1 and 2 into a bit of a chicane. So you've got to go a little deeper into 1.
Okay.
And basically roll the apex further into the corner.
Okay, I get you now. Yeah, he didn't do that. He was basically trying to hug Max's line. You're right. Like, instead of focusing on his own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What he needed to do, frankly, is what George did.
Yeah.
George had the line.
Yes.
And he executed it beautifully.
He does have flashes of brilliance, Russell. And then he just...
Very brief.
Yeah. And he has a similar problem with his head as well. We talked about that in Canada too. So it's something about that F2 class. I think they thought it would be easier, is my opinion. That's what I think is wrong there. I think they thought it'd be easier, and they're facing some struggles, and they don't know how to deal with them. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Anything you want to talk about? Anything else you want to talk about Norris and McLaren? I think it's pretty straightforward what we saw. That basically, and Lando even said it too, that first lap kind of cost him his race. He finished down by just under 3 seconds. Probably he definitely could have made some more time if he had the lead. They also kind of screwed up his pit stop by a second, so it just compounded. I think it just snowballed from there.
Yeah, it wasn't the greatest example of a well-executed race for him. One thing I will say, though, and I think you nailed it in the last couple of times talking about China and Canada, they have found something on these tires, specifically the mediums, because Lando did the thing that he does, which irritates the crap out of me. He doesn't listen to his engineers and doesn't like to pit. I don't know if he doesn't trust pitch strategy, he doesn't understand the math behind it, whatever it is. And I don't know that this is him. This may have been McLaren, but they kept him out longer. And in this case, it makes sense because once he got into clear air, once George was out of his way, I think George pitted, and then a lap or two later, Max came in. And then Lando waited a few laps. But as soon as he got into clear air out in front, he was lapping just over a second faster than everybody else on the grid on that medium tire.
Mm-hmm.
And that's impressive for being the first 10 laps, something like that, whatever it was, 15 laps. when they ended their first stint. So McLaren has something in that car that is making those medium tires work really well. And the medium tire, I don't know that it's the same compound that was in China, but it's in that similar range because they went harder this year than they usually do it in Spain. So there is something there, and he can drive that car in clean air, which reminds me of the, let's say, perceived problem that Mercedes had when they were being so dominant, 16 through 18, where when that car got into dirty air, the Mercedes at this point, when that car got into dirty air, it didn't perform anywhere near what it did out front, right? Like we'd see races where Lewis and Rosberg or Lewis and Valtteri would get out in front 1-2 and just disappear 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had races where, for whatever reason, penalties or poor qualifying, red flags, whatever, they start into the pack and don't go anywhere. And yeah, it was hard to pass with those cars, that's clear. But we saw that, specifically Lewis was able to pass and was able to make up a lot of positions, but could never really pull out that all-conquering gap that you could when you're out in front. And I think we might be seeing something like that from McLaren at this point as well, where they've, whatever it is, something they've done with the aerodynamics really likes the clean air. So maybe it's this mentality of, get them to qualify well so they're at the front and then they don't have to worry about dirty air. So make the car go faster that way, which would be great. But I think the pack is too tight at the moment for that.
Yeah, and that's right. And it's also, it seems like they don't degrade. Once they get into that optimal zone, those tires, it seems like they need 5 to 10 laps, less than 10 laps to get warm, those mediums. And then they never look back. And then like we saw in Canada with the intermediates too, like which I know aren't the mediums, but they could just, Lando could stay out on them almost forever. He was almost forced to pit just because he thought it would make more sense instead of risking a tire puncture. But whatever they're doing seems to let those tires go on forever once they get to that optimal point.
Yeah, and we've seen it too. I want to say it was China, and I think maybe Miami, where Lando is putting in reasonable lap times, let's say relatively consistent to the guys in front and behind him, and complaining about wear, complaining about degradation, complaining that they're going off, whatever it is. And then the guy in front of him pits, and like we saw in Spain, he turns it up a notch and he's a second and a half faster per lap on tires that a lap previously were allegedly dead.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. There is something there that they're really good on that. I'm going to say medium, but there's 6 compounds of tire, right? Mm-hmm. And I think they've tuned that car really well for the middle of that compound range.
Yeah, something like C3 to 5, maybe, or C2, 3, 4, or something. Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah,
or potentially even just C3 and 4.
Yeah,
or C2 and 3. I guess it would be because they started 0.
Yeah, I'm gonna start to pay attention to that every race. Like we've been theorizing it, but we didn't think it was actually it. But now we should probably write it down, just in case.
Yeah, make a note of which Pirelli compound is used for each one, and see if there's any sort of correlation to how the McLarens are doing.
Mm-hmm. Nobody else is talking about that but us, which is interesting. Go on. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, who knows? We could be entirely wrong and we're missing something huge, but it seems like it's there. So,
And yeah, you started this conversation, or I guess this point, with Lando being immature with, or a lack of knowledge about the strategy. And yeah, so that speaks to this, is that he thinks the tires are done. He thinks maybe we need to pit now, or I can stay out. I think I can keep the tires, like I can save the tires. But then out of nowhere, he gets this optimal point, and then he doesn't have to even worry or think about it. But so maybe that's detrimental to him in a sense, because he's not learning.
No, I don't think that's the case. I think his message is about the tires going off or degrading our mind games.
Oh, interesting.
I think it's them trying to get, because those radio messages are broadcast to every team, right? Every team has access to that radio broadcast. So he's trying to raise flags at Mercedes or Red Bull, okay, McLaren's are going to come in soon type of thing, get ready to undercut or overcut, whatever the case may be at the time. So I wouldn't read too much into what he's saying on the radio. That might just be strategy that they've tried to work out. But I think he definitely knows how that car feels on a certain set of tires in certain conditions, and he's definitely driving to a pace and not the performance of the car. Right, if that makes sense.
Sort of, yeah. Driving to a pace and not to the performance of a car. Like he knows what he can get, not necessarily what the car can give.
Well, no, like he's stuck in that pack, and he knows that he doesn't necessarily have enough to get the pass done. So he's going to sit there and drive at, let's say 2 seconds off the back of Max Verstappen, knowing that he's got to maintain the tires, right? Because he may be good with them, but that's part of it. Let's not kill the tire too quickly. So he's not trying to go for it every lap. And then once he gets into clear air, he knows that that's where the car is better. So he gains a second and a half because he knows that's the performance that the car has.
I see.
But with somebody in front of him, there's no point in using that. So he's driving to the pace of the pack effectively, which sounds bizarre from a racing standpoint. But it is part of the strategy, because you do need quite a big delta in lap time to get past somebody.
Half a second, they were saying this weekend, that's a lot.
It's usually more than that.
They said, in Spain, it was 0.4 to half a second, something like that. It's not Monaco where you need 4 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. Monaco's the extreme. The 4 second delta in lap time is insane, especially when your qualifying times are 2 seconds front to back.
Yeah. Another point why to not go back to Monaco.
Yeah, exactly.
All I want to say about Norris, and then I'll give you a chance and then we'll wrap it up, is if you thought you were going to do the one stop, stick to the one stop. You know what I mean? If that's why
there's no way you're doing a one stop.
I know, but if that's why he stayed out that long, or like we're saying, he knows once I'm in clear air, I can push those times, go for as long as you can. Right? Like build that lead. But I think they chickened out.
No, they actually nailed it. The only reason he came in second is because he pitted when he did. If he had waited any longer, then he would have started dropping off, and any advantage that he made was lost.
Oh, is that why?
So I don't.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, I don't have the data in front of me, but it was pretty clear while watching it that he was pulling out insane lap times for whatever it was, 4 or 5 laps that he ran after the two in front of him had pitted. And then as soon as there was any indication that the pace wasn't there anymore, they brought him in. And that was the strategy that, okay, he screwed it up. He lost first position into turn 1. And then it was always going to be a struggle to get back on top with the pit strategy. So he could have potentially come in the lap after Verstappen did and tried to fight them on track closer. But I think that would have been a bit of a shit show just with them being so close together. Whereas, I'm sorry, let's rephrase that. If he had pitted the lap after Verstappen, he didn't have any delta to him. So he would have gone out there, he would have had, 20 seconds, and he would have gotten to pit, and that advantage is gone. So this way, he got passed in the pits, but the offset was less than if he would have pitted after the lap after Verstappen did. All right, so the only reason he was in a position to get past George and past Lewis and behind Verstappen, even though he was 2.2 seconds down at the end of the race, was because he built up that advantage in those 4 or 5 laps.
I see, which goes to what you're saying about the clear air. McLaren did kind of spill those beans because they said, we need to pit now for the second pit stop, otherwise we're going to miss our chance to beat the Mercedes. And
Yes.
And Lando was asking, hey, I want to win. I don't want to finish third. And I think he didn't completely understand that what you're just saying right now, we have to be in front of the Mercedes if we want to win. So I get that now. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. And I'm just remembering this now, the 2.2 that he finished behind Max, in the last 6 to 8 laps, he took 4 seconds out of that time.
Yeah.
And that's something we've talked about with Lando before. He is extremely good at closing down gaps, especially late in the day. He needed probably another 4 to 6 laps to get that 2 seconds down to nothing. But it shows that, he's pretty handy behind the wheel of that thing.
I agree with that. And I also want to add that I wonder if Max, because Max did hold off towards the end. Lando was gaining even more than that. And then Max pulled back, I think, about half a second. Do you think Max is fucking with him? Saving the car when he knows the wind's there and pulling it out when he needs to? Or is he genuinely trying to give it everything he has, and from time to time will pull out a little bit of time on Lando, just enough?
Yeah, so I do have some details about that. If we're done with McLaren, we can get into Red Bull.
Sure.
So Red Bull, I haven't looked into this in any real detail, but what they were saying on the broadcast, and they're usually pretty correct about this, is that Max is out of engine components for the year. So it's pretty well known that the Honda powertrain team that is at the races for VCarb and Red Bull every weekend always mandate that during practice the power units are turned down slightly. And that's to help save them, help add some durability to the lifespan of that engine, because they only get 3, I believe, or 4 maybe, whatever it is, that have to take them the entire season, and then they start getting penalties. And we are not even midway through the season, and Max has utilized all the extra components that he has.
Jesus.
Which doesn't mean the next time he changes engines or energy stores or anything like that he gets a penalty. It's not that the components he's used are dead. It's that they've introduced them to the pool. So if they introduce another new one, or if one actually goes pop, then he's going to have to take a penalty. So you're right in the sense that Max probably did dial it back, kind of dropping that half a second back into Norris. And I don't think it's because Max is playing any sort of mind games or trying to tease him with, okay, let's let him get close because I know I've got it. I think it's that for whatever reason, this Honda is not as reliable as we may think it was.
Well, it's still Honda because you and I've talked about that before. Is it not Red Bull at this point, or it's in like an open secret that it's still technically Honda?
No, it is at this point. It is Honda. Red Bull powertrains will not be building engines until 2026.
I thought in 2022 they took it over, and that was the reliability issue in those two of those first three races.
So they took over the manufacturing, like let's say final assembly of the powertrains in their building in Milton Keyes. It is still a Honda powertrain, and Honda engineers are still responsible for it and working with the Red Bull team on it.
I see.
Honda did back out of F1, but there needed to be a support system in place for it. So basically what Honda was saying was, hey, we're not developing anything more. You can't develop the engines anymore. That was frozen. And Honda said, okay, you've got an engine, here's what you need to run it. Here are some people to help run it. And we're done. We're not going any further. So that's why Red Bull set up Red Bull powertrains and took over a portion of it. But the basic units are still built in Japan. They're kind of final assembly. Final assembly is done in England type of thing, with support from Honda. So it is still very much a Honda project.
Okay. Two points then. One, Max isn't sandbagging. Then he's doing what he can. I guess he is sort of sandbagging, but in the sense that it's a necessary evil. And two, last year was a fucking miracle then, because you're right. Maybe these aren't that reliable. Last year's even more amazing than we originally thought. In a sense, like they had 100% reliability for Max.
Yes. I can't remember if Max had to take any penalties, because just because nothing went pop doesn't mean that he didn't need additional power units. I'm thinking maybe in Singapore he took something because they knew they weren't going to be competitive.
They were out in Q2 in 2023. They started 11th. Max finished 6th or 5th, one of the two. I don't think he took a penalty. I can't think of. I know in 2022 he took a penalty in Belgium. I think that was the last time. I can't think off the top of my head.
Okay, he may not have. But the other side of that is I'm hesitating bringing this back up, but with the change in aerodynamics from last year to this year, because the car concept did change, it may have changed the aerodynamic load on the car in such a way that the engine has different load characteristics. So I know in the last episode we talked a lot about aerodynamic load and what it does to suspension components and body panels and how you design structures. It also has a lot to do with how the engine performs, right? For that same reason. As the air moves over the car and as it creates drag and downforce across different parts of the body, the engine has to work harder. And one thing I found interesting about this car, and I've been looking at some analysis of it, The reason the Red Bull DRS has been so effective, we mainly saw this last year where as soon as Max had DRS, he was gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was like a rocket ship. They found a way to design the car so that at top speed, with that flap open, the aerodynamics effectively stall at high speed. So you want downforce to push you into the ground around the corners, right? The more force you have pushing down in the corners, the more speed you can carry through them. You don't want that downforce or that drag on the straights.
Mm.
So when aerodynamics stall, you basically lose all downforce. And you can see some historical footage of this when, the Ford GT comes to mind, but a lot of older cars were designed this way, where engineers would tape pieces of string to the car and watch it with binoculars as it went through corners. And you can actually see when the aerodynamics stall, the string sticks straight up as the car is moving forward. And it seems like that's effectively what has given Red Bull the advantage with DRS, is that they've gotten it to a point where the suspension is set stiff enough and so precisely that as it hits top speed and that wing opens, basically the entire aero platform stalls and it has drastically less downforce than the rest of the field, which allows it to utilize its engine power better and push it to higher top speeds.
Amazing that they're the only one who figured that out in this regulation era, in this ground effect area. Because we talked about last week how that a lot of that's going away. But yeah, go on.
I don't know that they're the only ones that found it out. I think Newey is the only one crazy enough to say, fuck what everybody else says, this is what we're doing, and we're going to set up a car this way. Because I think Max is the only person that can potentially drive that car, if that's the case.
Mm.
Because the suspension has to be perfect for that to happen. Because if it's not perfect, you end up with porpoising or bouncing, which is an issue, and they've got sensors and everything to pinpoint how much bouncing there is. And if it's too much, if the load sensors are over what the FIA has stated as a maximum, then they make you raise the ride height, which is effectively what happened to them in Singapore, right?
Mm.
So Newey has designed a car that works in one single window, but he's designed it well enough that it works on 98% of the tracks last year.
Mm.
This year seems to have gotten away from them, but that, looking at it from a couple of different angles, that seems to be what is happening, and it's a really clever way to go about it. It's a great piece of engineering, but it does have a pretty high likelihood of biting you in the ass.
Yeah, it's you really have to be too perfect. In a sense, it sounds like
Yes.
you have to be so completely perfect. Otherwise, it's what's the analogy? Like raising a bear cub or something. Like it's still a wild animal that can bite you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the analogy that comes to mind right away is, on a knife edge.
Yeah,
you're trying to balance it, right? And that may be why Sergio is struggling so much. Max isn't human, so he just they update his software and he's good to go. Perez,
he definitely
not
did.
so much.
He definitely did skip generations. Jos Verstappen was the guy at Benetton while Michael was getting 90 points. I think between him, JJ Letho, and who was the third one? I don't even remember his name. 3 other drivers between them, I think they got 20 points. So Jos is not
Right.
Jos is not superhuman. Somehow Max is. He may be a robot. You may be right. We don't know for sure.
I think he is.
There's no proof that he isn't. So I'm just going to say that. It also speaks to Yoss's crazy brain that I imagine he married Max's mom just to create a kid like Max. We've talked about it before. Yeah. There's no love there. It was purely for eugenics. Purely for that.
Yeah.
Anyways, we have just a few more things to talk about. Do you want anything else you want to finish up with Red Bull?
No, I think that's it for Red Bull.
Very amazing of Newey to take a detrimental thing like a stiff suspension that everybody's struggling with and turn it into his advantage is all I'm going to add about what you said. Like, very clever.
Yeah, and the suspension and aero interface has always been a very Red Bull thing, and we won't talk about it here, but even the old cars, they were doing things with the old cars that were just mind-boggling. But yeah, anyway,
I remember
it's another topic for another day.
I remember you saying that years ago, like that's why you fell in love with Red Bull back in the day, was just their clever engineering. I remember those days.
Yeah, like if you go back and you look at their high rake designs, they were probably the only team that got a high rake design to properly work. And everybody thought that when we went to ground effects, okay, ground effect, you can't use a high rake suspension setup. So what's Red Bull going to do? They don't know how to operate it in anything but high rake. Well, lo and behold, it's not a rake issue. It's a aerodynamics and mechanical suspension integration problem. Nothing else. So anyway, there's a lot to talk about in that. So we won't go there.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll talk about high rakes another day. Mercedes, I guess there's not really much to talk about there. They're looking solid. I'll ask this because it relates to the next team we're going to talk about. What's the likelihood do you think they catch Ferrari? I don't think it stays like this, but hell, it's not looking good.
No, I think they're there. I think, I don't know what their points deficit is at the moment, but we can look it up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I can tell you in a second.
I've got it here.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
So 237 to 151. So
86 points.
It's a wider gap than I had thought. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong one.
No, they're
over 100.
You're right. It's 237 to 151.
No, that's McLaren.
Oh.
270 to 151.
So 120.
Yeah.
So, listen, they came back pretty hard in 2022.
Yeah.
So it's not undoable. Like, it's not impossible.
Yeah, and I think likely what we're going to see is McLaren pass Ferrari.
100%.
So it'll be Red Bull McLaren, and then it will probably go down to the wire between Ferrari and Mercedes. And I think Mercedes will take it.
If it stays like this, yes.
Yeah. And it does seem like Mercedes has gotten on top of their issue.
And Ferrari hasn't. I just want to remind all the tifosi, all the people on Instagram after Monaco who, I said this last week too. I said this in Canada. I'm going to say it again because it has to be smacked into their thick skull. I think you all thought the job was done with one good race. And I saw them celebrating at the end of Monaco, and all the pit crew was screaming the Italian national anthem on the verge of tears. And in my head, I thought right then, I said, you really think you've done everything you need to do this season? You don't think there's any more challenges left? You think the job is over? And lo and behold, in a month, they fucked up everything. Everything. I'm not even a Ferrari fan anymore. I'm just saying, like, this arrogance is the reason you're losing. I'm trying to help you here, Ferrari and Ferrari fans. I have a lot more to talk about, but yeah, what do you want to say to that? Do you have any like engineering insights, any actual non-emotional comments like me?
About Ferrari?
About Ferrari, yeah. Well, I guess there is some emotion in your comments, but yeah, go on.
No, there isn't. Not for me. I couldn't care less about Ferrari. The inconsistency is disturbing. Inconsistency like that is a sign that you don't understand what's going on.
Yeah. You don't fall off a cliff after winning a race. Unless you're Prost Peugeot, unless you're Williams in 2012. Like, what is this?
Yeah, and this is not Mercedes going in the wrong direction or having correlation issues or something like that. This is truly, we have no idea what this car is doing.
Yeah, Mercedes with their issues were finishing 6th and 7th. Not 10 to 11th.
Pretty consistently.
Yeah, exactly. 11th and 12th in Canada, and then fighting each other for 5th, causing rifts in the teams for 5th. In a track that they're normally good at. They normally have a good time at Spain.
Yeah.
Oh, before I comment on the Sainz Leclerc thing, this is actually speaking to you because you brought up this point when it happened. Didn't they fire Binotto to stop all this shit? Wasn't firing Binotto supposed to stop all this?
And Binotto was a scapegoat. Right?
Exactly.
Firing him was never going to fix anything.
Yeah, and at the time I said, if you fire him, it's because of all the strategy fuck-ups, somebody has to fall on his sword. But I think you had the best take on it. You should just kept him in the engineering department. Because he brought you that championship fighting car. Just because he fucked up everything else around it doesn't mean you get rid of him.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to put something out there that is definitely going to be controversial.
Oh, boy.
But I think there's merit in it. Ferrari needs to shut down their racing operations in Maranello. They need to open a brand new facility with everything kind of re-looked at. Realistically, get rid of a large portion of their current staff and not necessarily start from scratch, but have a real good look at what should and shouldn't stay. And this has been a problem with Ferrari from the beginning, and it's that Italian hard-headedness, to say it nicely.
No, you're right.
Yeah, Enzo Ferrari was notoriously hard-headed. Didn't want to save his automobile company and sell it to Ford simply because he wanted control over the race team. Right? He wanted control over every single little aspect of the race team, and always did till the day he died. And I think that's part of the problem here, is that they're too tied into the nonsense and too tied into the mythology of Ferrari to make the necessary changes that are needed. And someone has to come in and say this isn't working.
Yeah.
Because
go on.
Besides, you probably know this better than I, when was the last time they won the championship?
Was 2007, but that was the Schumacher residue structure. Like the German English structure was still there.
Right. And so that's with Kimi, right?
Yes. and they won the
So-
constructors the next year. Should have won the title, but yeah, still that's 16 years now.
Yeah. And in those 16 years, there's not a whole lot of wins.
No, that's a very
For
good
a
point.
team that has the hype that it has and gets paid the amount of money it is just for showing up every year, and to have the authority within the organization that it has, right? Ferrari, I believe, is the sole team that can veto regulations simply by saying, okay, then we're not racing anymore. The fact that they have that much power, and they've got probably in the last 16 years less wins than Max Verstappen has in his career.
I gotta look that up because you might be right.
So I want to say he's at like 61 wins now,
Yeah,
something like that. It wouldn't surprise me if they were less than 61 over the last 16 years, even with their somewhat competitive Vettel years.
yeah, that was only 14 wins from Vettel.
Right.
Or I think
And
our
Alonso didn't have a lot of wins.
No, you're right. Kimi had one. Charles and Carlos only don't even have 10 between them. Yeah, actually,
Right.
off the top of my head, there's probably only 35 wins there. In since Kimi won. Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So how can you tell me things are going okay at Ferrari? And not you, that's just the general question.
Yeah, I know. I understand what you're saying. Like, how can you say it's going to be next year? How can you say we're a year away? Like, yeah, you're nowhere close to anything right now. That's such a good point. You don't even have to move to Maranello. You just have to do what was done in 96. Bring a German and an Englishman. Smack everybody around, tell them it's your team now. You can keep everything in place. They just need direction. They need direction from a winning mindset. They don't have a winning mindset. You brought up Enzo Ferrari, which was an excellent point that I didn't know completely. I didn't know the whole story. One man can guide you to glory if he has a winning mindset, if he has the right idea how to win. But now that he's been gone since what, 86? We saw it at the exhibition. I think he died 86, 87.
Something like that.
Yeah, like it's time. You're right. In a sense, you either move the company or you bring in a German to keep everything in order. I think that's the smartest way to do it. But you need some external force running this team.
Yeah, and the reason I say, blow the company away and start over, not necessarily start over, but it's because there were points in Enzo's career and lifetime where we had the same thing. Large spans of nothing, right? In F1, Ferrari was getting beaten by Maserati, which today, most F1 fans don't even know what Maserati is.
Mm-hmm.
But they used to be one of the big competitors in F1 as their own team, their own personally funded and owned team, right? Now they all fall under the Fiat umbrella, which is hilarious to me, but that's another story. But Enzo Ferrari, for the longest time, fought the design team on where to put the engine. And he's famously quoted as saying, the horse pulls the cart, not the other way around. And that was his mentality about where the engine should be. The engine should always be in the front of the car because the horse pulls the cart. Well, doesn't another team start putting engines behind drivers, properly balancing the car and having it set up for, the type of racing that we're doing, and then you start seeing results. And then it's almost impossible to have that argument of no, the engine has to be in the front. Well, look at all the data that shows in the back we can do much more, right? And that was a seismic shift for Ferrari. You had Enzo Ferrari, who fought this for decades, that he was never going to do this, even in his road cars and in his race cars. And then finally he said, well, screw it. I can't fight it anymore. This is what we have to do.
So,
right?
So the mid-engine wasn't designed by Ferrari. This is breaking news to me. I thought the mid-engine was what Ferrari was known for.
No.
Unbelievable.
Ferrari never wanted an engine behind the driver.
Typical.
No. Calling it mid-engine shouldn't say they didn't invent the mid-engine, because all mid-engine means is that the engine is between the front and rear axles.
So not like it's just, whereas Porsche gets his rear engine, right? Or as Porsche could be called mid-engine as well, is what you're saying.
Porsche's rear engine because it's over the rear axle.
Okay.
So if you look at the new Mustang GTD, for example, they've pushed the engine back and it no longer sits on top of the front axle. It sits just behind the front axle. So the new Mustang GTD, their $400,000 supercar, is a mid-engined Mustang, which when people heard that, they lost their minds thinking it was going to be like a competitor for the Corvette. But no, it's still very much the engine in front of the driver. It's just between the axles. Anyway, tangent.
Yeah, we'll get back on topic, yeah. Anything else you want to add about Ferrari? Yeah.
Yeah, so where I was going with that is in Enzo's lifetime, we had that change. He's realized this has to change. After a lot of pushback, this is another one of those moments where Ferrari has to get over itself and stop this nationalistic Ferrari is the Italian national F1 team.
Exactly.
Stop listening to the tifosi and do what actually has to be done.
Mm-hmm. Does that not sound like something we're familiar with? Toronto Maple Leafs.
No.
I know. I know. We won't talk about it. I'm just saying, it sounds exactly the same. Don't let the fans guide you into doing the wrong thing. Do what needs to be done.
Yeah. I've given up on them a long time ago.
As I'm right there with Ferrari right now. I'm giving up. I just want to add before we move on. Sainz said something amazing in the post-race interview. He said, Charles seems to complain a lot after every race. Good for him. Good for him. Yeah, go on.
No, I'm a little disappointed he hasn't done more of that, because Ferrari showed him the door before the season started. What allegiance does he have to them? If I was him, I'd be out there saying all sorts of shit just to stir the pot.
I agree. I think he's at that point now. I think at the beginning, because you and I were talking about it a lot, at the beginning the results showed everything. He didn't need to say anything.
Sure.
Now he's like, okay, now we're struggling. Let me say what's really going on here. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's fair.
My last therapy, or my second last therapy episode, is going to be about Ferrari. I'm going to let them have it. Because I'm almost done with therapy, just to let you know. There's not going to be many therapy episodes in the future, but Ferrari needs to be one of them. Everything, not just everything wrong with them, but just as a former fan, they have so much to fucking be told off for.
That makes me concerned with how you're going to end your final therapy session.
No pill swallowing, I promise.
I was going to say, I hope you don't go out with a bang.
Maybe I should do the recording at your house away from certain things I have. Yeah, they are such a disappointment. I don't even know what else to say. Good for Sainz. Just friendly reminder, this is our weekly reminder that Ferrari destroyed the career of Vettel, Raikkonen, and Mick Schumacher for Charles Leclerc. Okay. I don't have much else to talk about for the rest of the grid. I just wrote down goodbye Austin and goodbye Haas and Sauber. Sauber may still score points, I think, at some point. It's highly unlikely. I don't think Haas is scoring another point the rest of the season. If they do, it'll be 1 or 2. Yeah, go on.
I will just say I am disappointed that we have not seen a race ban for Kevin Magnussen. What happened to K-Mag? Did Komatsu castrate him or something? Like, he has no balls left. I want to see a driver get suspended for a race and put somebody else in that seat.
Yeah, and you notice it's coincided with them getting no points. When Magnussen was going crazy, they were getting points. So it's to their benefit to let him go wild.
Yes. And then you have the opportunity of seeing Magnussen sitting out. Inevitably, it's going to be Behrman that gets put in there. Can he prove to be better than Magnussen in that car?
Great idea. You're right.
Because he was in the car this weekend, FP1, and he was not miles away from Hülkenberg and Magnussen.
Like in terms of yeah, but we've talked about before practice means nothing, but yeah, go.
Sure. And I know you have your feelings about Behrman, but it would truly be interesting to see if he's in that Haas car on race day against Nico Hülkenberg. Does he have a better performance than Magnussen does? Because if he does, it makes sense to sign Behrman as a replacement for Magnussen.
Sure, I guess. I've already
said
my piece.
And then you still have another seat to fill. So, anyway, that's Haas. I really expect to see Magnussen get that final 2 penalty points.
Oh, at some point, yeah.
And then we'll have a grid that is, 22 drivers this year, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, actually, no, it wouldn't, because Behrman would show up once. We'll have the first F2 season where a driver has more points in F1 than F2.
Yeah, I've said my piece on Behrman. I'm not going to say anything more.
Yeah. Okay, so who's next then?
I'm just going to write off Racing Bulls like this just had a bad weekend. It seems every time they bring in an upgrade, they have a bad weekend and they follow it with a good weekend. So I don't think there's much else to talk about there. Yeah.
Yeah, so who knows? Maybe Yuki's on the podium in Austria.
It's going to happen.
I haven't forgotten about that.
I know. I'm rooting for you now and Yuki. It would be funny. Aston Martin, whatever. Alpine, 3 races with points in a row.
Double points,
yeah.
So
something's
they're
there.
Definitely coming back.
Something's there. Yeah, they're past Haas now. That was inevitable, but yeah, I doubt they catch Austin or Racing Bulls. Maybe Austin. Especially if Racing Bulls turns it on. Could be interesting now. It could be interesting. 5-7 could be interesting now if Alpine keeps it up.
Mm-hmm. Let's hope they can. Let's hope they don't end up like Napoleon at Waterloo.
Cue up ABBA's Waterloo. All right. Do you have Do you have our predictions in front of you?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did
I
I
did take a look at them already.
What did I say?
You said Max.
Yes.
You said Max, Lando, Perez.
Ugh. Okay, so I got
So
two of the
you
first
nailed
three.
the top two.
There you go.
Yeah.
Ugh, Perez.
And then you said Piastri, Russell.
Russell finished fourth.
Yeah.
I'm taking that as
and
a win.
Charles finished fifth.
Yeah, whatever. What did you say?
I got it completely wrong. I said Lewis, Max, Sainz.
Yeah.
And then Piastri, Perez. So
I liked your Lewis
I wrote
prediction.
this weekend off. Yeah, so did I. Which I was really fucking happy when I saw that Mercedes go around Russell at turn one until I realized it had the fucking yellow on the camera pod.
Yeah, for a split second there, it all seemed like it all seemed perfect.
Yeah, too perfect.
What
P10, you got P10.
Yes. Ocon.
Ocon was P10.
It's all he's good
Stroll,
for.
I don't even know where the fuck he ended up with.
Yeah, that's what I keep saying about Austin, like being goodbye. Like, who cares? Like, they're so pointless. And you nailed it a couple weeks ago when you said Stroll's going to be a harm to somebody. Like, Stroll is definitely like a harm in that car. When he's not, when he's not a harm or he's not going to kill himself, he's useless. It's the K-Mag situation. Like, we'd almost rather you try and kill everybody.
Yeah. And for a car to be so abysmal in Spain, like they were nowhere.
Yeah.
And the reason they test in Barcelona so much, or used to test in Barcelona so much, is because it is, let's say it's the nominal track. It's the track that represents most of the conditions you're going to see throughout the racing season.
Yeah, high-speed corners, low-speed corners, great straightaways, yeah, elevation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And to be so abysmal there, and okay, yeah, we have more street tracks now, and, you know, some are saying that it's not really a relevant track to test on anymore because of that.
Mm.
But the Aston hasn't been good at street tracks either.
Yeah.
So, like I said in the last episode, it might be time to just burn that building to the ground.
I'm never giving you a torch. You'll burn down Maranello and you'll burn down, where are they? Not Milton.
Silverstone.
Silverstone. Yeah, don't burn down Silverstone.
They're right across. Sorry?
Don't burn down Silverstone, Sean. Don't do it.
Well, Silverstone's a town, but, you know. Anyway, the new Aston facility is directly across the street from the track.
Mm.
So, anyway. As long as the fire is not too big, it shouldn't harm the track.
Okay, if you can contain the fire, you can do it.
All right. Thanks, Nick.
What was our outliers?
Yours was Valtteri in the top 10, which,
Yeah.
I mean, the top 10 is something, but not the race.
Mm. And what was yours?
And mine was Lando does not finish.
Which, once again, it was another one I liked. I think you just should have said Lando fucks up lap 1. I'll give you it. I'm going to give you it because you blamed it on a lap 1 incident, and he did fuck up lap 1.
No, but at the same time, this is partly me pinning myself in. I picked my P5 and then realized Lando wasn't there, so I had to do something with Lando.
Formula One
but
philosophy.
that being said...
Off the top of our heads. Yeah, go on. That being said.
Lando, I believe, is the only person this year to not have a DNF.
Piastri too, I think. Just outside the points. So I think Lando hasn't DNF'd and he's finished inside the points.
That might be what it is. Points finishes without a DNF or without a retirement. I don't know, I forget what the exact stat was, but it was pretty impressive. So now I'm trying to see if we can put all of our eggs in the Lando basket having a perfect season in the sense that there is no failures on that car.
Let's go for it. I'm in. I got my predictions in front of me for Austria. What do you got yours?
You go first, and I'll make it up as I go.
So what I'll do is I'll say all of my predictions, so that you can think it over, and then you can say yours.
Okay.
So I wrote this down today. I think Lando Norris is P1 for Austria.
Okay.
I think he. This is where they brought their upgrades last year. This is where he's been notoriously good. I think he takes a win. I think he's right. We just need to bring it all together, is what he said about the last 3 races. I think they have a good weekend. Maybe they don't get it all together, but I think they have a good weekend. I'm going to still say Max second, though. And,
Okay.
yeah, obviously, because it's just kind of hard to keep Max off the podium. Piastri is going to be 3, because I think McLaren's going to have a good weekend in general. And then out of spite to the other 2 drivers on their team, I said Sainz 4 and Lewis 5. Like you said, I think Mercedes as well is also going to be consistent and solid. But I think Sainz is he's gonna put his money where his mouth is. That being said, he hasn't had a good last few Austrias. But we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. And then I said Bottas P10. I'm going to try again. But this time I'm going to set the bar lower. It's just 10th.
All right.
Once again, Sauber is pretty good here. At least they were last year and the year before. So maybe this time, 3rd time's the charm. And my outlier is no Austin in the points again, which is a big deal. Because I think you're right. I think Yuki could potentially be a P7. And then maybe Danny a P9. Danny was technically faster this weekend. It means fuck all when you finish 17th. So
it absolutely does mean fuck all.
Yeah. So Yuki's probably going to beat him this weekend, but maybe Danny can string along too.
Okay. So then I'm going to say Max because I think you're forgetting, Nick, who owns that track.
The Red Bull Ring. I have not forgotten.
So if Max hasn't been in a 2020 car, or sorry, a 22 car, every day this next week up until the race around that track, I'll be surprised. Because that is something they're allowed to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. I did read that report. He's been trying to figure out this car by the 2 year ago car. Yeah, the car from 2 years ago.
Especially before Spain, he spent a few days in Imola in the 2022 car, trying to figure out what caused them so many headaches there. So I'm going to say Max because I think whether they're on top of it or not, he's just going to have that track nailed down. And then I am going to put Lando P2.
Okay.
Piastri P3.
So we both agree McLaren has a good weekend.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I'm going to put Lewis and George.
Wow. That must hurt you to put George in the top 5.
I'm putting it to the car and nothing else. Okay. And he's going in 5th.
He's a collateral damage.
So.
Yeah. He's collateral damage to your thought process. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to put Danny in P10.
Solid.
Because I think Yuki can get up there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to put... I want to put him higher, but I can't because of my top 5. Yuki P6.
Funny enough, I was thinking that too. But I can see Leclerc or George snatching that up and in mind. That's why I think Yuki a solid 7 is a possibility. We'll see. It's bold. So your outlier is Yuki P6.
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. No crazy prediction.
It's not as out there as some of the other ones, but
yeah.
6. Watch, this is the race where he gets on the fucking podium.
I was going to say this is a race where you do get a lot of random finishes. There probably is going to be some DNFs this weekend. Good chance a Ferrari engine blows here because it has the last couple of years. Yeah.
Quite spectacularly too.
In 22, are we thinking the same thing with Sainz?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a big old hole that left in that engine.
Wasn't that right before, or was that, I think the calendar was different that year. I think, yeah, Silverstone came first. So Sainz just won a race and then his engine blew. That's pretty funny.
Yeah. Yep. There was a term I heard for this when engines blow spectacularly like that. I'm trying to remember what it is. I want to say it's malice in the combustion palace, something like that.
Okay.
Which Ferrari seems to be pretty prone to.
They haven't had an engine blow yet, so they are due. Maybe that should be your outlier.
Exactly. Yeah, you know what? That's actually a really good one. How about we do that as a combined one?
Yeah. Sean and Nick, outlier prediction. I like that.
All Ferrari engines pop.
6 engines. So both Haas's, both Saubers. That fucks my P10. Whatever. I'm in. If Bottas doesn't finish P10, why not get the outlier, right? Let's go.
Exactly. I want to say this wouldn't be the first time that's happened.
I'm trying to think.
I want to say it may not have been all of them, but I want to say Baku a few years ago, we had 4 of 6 or 5 of 6, something like that, Ferrari engines go.
Yeah. I think only Sainz and Schumacher survived that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so that would be 4 of 6.
Yeah. We have seen 3 of 4 go at, it was Bahrain 2022 of Red Bull. They haven't had that now, and they haven't had that in a couple of years either. I'll come back to that. That'll be an outlier prediction in a few races. Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's good. So we're into the triple header now. So we've got Austria and Silverstone. So it'll be a busy couple of weeks.
Yeah. Hopefully we can get together for the next one. But yeah. Life, man.
Yeah.
It's been insane.
Yeah, it has. And Gatsby's over there staring at me because he's not too happy about what she said about him.
Fuck him. Wait. That's my employee. He can sue me. Good job, Gatsby. Tell him I said that.
Oh, just remember, this has all been recorded.
Fuck. It was a matter of time before I had like an employee, what is it called? Employee harassment issue. We've been at this 6 months and I haven't been sued yet. You know what, Sean? That's a win.
Well, people have to listen first.
This is your show too. Like, why are you taking shots? Jesus.
I'm just saying.
They are listening on YouTube. Formula One Philosophy at YouTube. Formula One _ Philosophy at Instagram. And Formula One Philosophy Pod at Gmail. F1 Philosophy Pod at gmail.com. To join our fantasy league. There's 7 people in that league. There's only 2 of us, right? Couldn't possibly be just the 2 of us with 7 different accounts, right?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Which, by the way, Gatsby annihilated us.
Did he? That bastard. Good job, producer Gatsby.
He had 184 points.
Damn.
Yeah.
We'll get him next week, I think. Let's hope.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, maybe I should keep the Saubers out of mine. Oof. Oh, you know what? I got 204 points on one team. Oh, and then I got crushed on the other. Never. We don't have to talk about what happened to the other. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Well, producer Gatsby's in third overall, so.
God damn it. Have I willed this into existence? Oh, boy.
I think you have.
Oh, boy. He is going to terminate us. Okay, let's start creating the time machine, sending people back in time. We'll tell them not to have sex with Dua Lipa, though, okay? Because that's... Or wait, what's not Dua Lipa? What's her name? Sarah Connor, what was her name in real life? I forget her name. Anyways.
I don't know, but the fact that you... Okay.
I picked
All
Dua
right.
Lipa as a random celebrity not to have sex with, but, I'm like, wait a minute. Why didn't I just say the girl from Terminator? God damn, I'm probably going to have to edit this out. Anyways.
Yeah, I mean, Gatsby's getting up there in age. We could just wait a couple of years.
Now he's definitely going to kill us. All right. We'll be back for Silverstone. No, sorry, Austria recap and then Silverstone predictions. These are going to be two great races. I can feel it. And I'm excited.
Let's hope so.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Alrighty. Good night.